Citizen U presents UFO, where you find out.
We're the two teachers, and today you're going to find out about President-elect Trump's relationship with the courts.
Boy, complex, confusing, you betcha, but we're here to make the complex simple and the confusing clear. Andy, Obama may have lost the election to Trump because of the courts.
Well, we know the courts, that Article 3, very little in the Constitution about the courts. Congress gets to make up the courts. We know that for generations, the Supreme Court has been at 9 justices. When Scalia died, that left that vacancy. But this was no ordinary vacancy. You had the conservative icon Scalia dying under the progressive President Obama, who thought he was going to be able to name even a moderate liberal as a justice, and the Republicans who controlled the Senate said absolutely not. It ended up affecting a presidential election.
And as hard as Hillary worked to get out from underneath the shadow of that Supreme Court appointment of Merrick Garland, there were many out there in the hinterlands who weren't necessarily voting for Trump. They were voting for Scalia's replacement, and then the next replacement, and possibly even the next replacement. And they were willing to make that corrupt bargain, perhaps, with an unpopular Republican candidate, because Republicans at their core understood that a Republican victory could mean 2, maybe even 3 conservative justices on the Supreme Court who will serve a lot longer than Trump's 4-year term, will serve maybe for the next 20, 30 years.
You're right. I mean, it really disrupted the whole notion of appointing the Supreme Court or federal judges. The Constitution clearly says the president gets to appoint federal judges, Supreme Court judges, to vacancies. The Senate consents. You have to get a majority of the Senate to approve. But when you had an opening on the court, particularly a conservative opening for Scalia, the voters out there felt like they were indirectly electing a Supreme Court justice. It's really unusual in our country, and we saw in the results that particularly in those battleground states, the conservatives and the Republicans were able to get more voters out, maybe partly because of disliking Hillary Clinton, maybe partly because of liking Trump, but we know a lot of voters came out to simply influence the makeup of the Supreme Court.
But Andy, this is where this becomes a little bit more interesting and intriguing. The Supreme Court might have helped Trump get elected, but the judiciary, the court system, may actually be a real hindrance on a Trump presidency, because Trump is facing some legal battles of his own.
Well, he has legal battles of his own, lawsuits that existed before he became the president-elect, lawsuits that existed before the election regarding a lot of his business, some of his business dealings, including Trump University. And some of those are in federal courts. And we know, based on previous precedent with Bill Clinton, that if a president has been sued, that being president does not make them immune from facing that lawsuit. So that President Trump will have to either settle lawsuits or he'll have to litigate those lawsuits during his presidency. With Bill Clinton, that became a big deal because it was during the deposition for a sexual harassment lawsuit that Bill Clinton perjured himself, and that became the basis of some of the impeachment charges against President Clinton.
Andy, what an interesting election 2016 has been. The courts may have helped get Donald Trump elected, but those same courts may hurt his presidency from being successful. We're the two teachers. No fancy words.
No fancy suits.
Plain talk about issues you need to know.
Just in time.